Hello, horse racing fans. It is October, so it's time for things to get a little bit more morbid. Horse racing is not always sunshine and rainbows. I love the sport with all my heart, but like any sport, horse racing has its corruption. But it is in a different way than other sports, considering that the main stars of the sport speak a different language than us. Their lives are in the palms of our hands, and not everyone in the horse racing industry is deserving of such power, and power tends to corrupt. In horse racing, it can take many forms, but for today's video, we will be talking about one of its ugliest parts, when racehorses die. But not just die in a way that leaves us with more questions than answers. Some of the most famous racehorses in history are ones who died rather young, but for every horse that had a clear and cut death, there are also horse deaths that barely tell us anything, and have undertones of something even more sinister going on, that leaves people's minds racing as they struggle to fill in pieces of the puzzle, not helped by how popular these horses are, making these lack of answers more concerning to the general public. Here are some of the most mysterious racehorse deaths. Shergar. Official cause of death? Unconfirmed. Likely murdered. You can't have a video about horse racing mysteries without the greatest horse racing mystery of all time, a horse named Shergar. He was originally famous on the track for his incredible racing ability, but he was immortalized by his mysterious disappearance. After a short but successful career which included 3 Group 1 victories, the biggest one being the Epsom Derby by a record margin of 10 lengths, he was retired to stud after an uncharacteristic loss in the St. Leger. While still perfectly healthy, they believed something was now amiss with the horse, and chose to retire him at the peak of his career. He was likely too valuable to continue racing at that point, with a stud value as high as £10 million. Despite such little racing time, he was quickly regarded as a national hero in Ireland. His first stud season proved solid, producing 36 foals that would go on to be stakes winners. The best of that crop was Altal, who, like his dad, won 3 Group 1 races, but that's where the similarities ended. Altal took his Group 1 races in 2 separate hemispheres, winning the Irish St. Leger in, Ireland, and then the Queen Elizabeth and Underwood Stakes in Australia. Some pretty good results for a sire, but for a horse as famous as Shergar, he would never be capable of fulfilling everyone's expectations. But before his progeny would ever make it to the tracks, or even before he could start his second season of breeding, Shergar would disappear off the face of the earth. The story has been told plenty of times, so I'll try to keep it brief. On February 8, 1983, a group of armed robbers kidnapped Shergar as well as his groom, Jim Fitzgerald, and took them in 2 separate vehicles which went separate directions. After Fitzgerald was released, he was told the ransom for Shergar was £2 million, and was given a codename of King Neptune for negotiations. There would be a few attempts for negotiations, but with little to go off of and many red herrings. It came to an end 4 days after Shergar was kidnapped, when Shergar's syndicate demanded photos to prove Shergar was still alive. They got a few Polaroids like this one of him, but they were all close-ups, proving nothing. The kidnappers refused to go any further when the syndicate demanded a better photograph, and the horse ultimately was never seen again, and the kidnappers were never identified, although it is generally believed they were in the IRA. With only this information to go off of and a few unnerving Polaroids, theories about what happened to this horse are rampant and go to many odd places. One story goes that he was spotted being ridden by a man named Lord Lucan. Lord Lucan was an Irish aristocrat who had disappeared in 1974 after being suspected of murdering his maid. Like Shergar, after his initial disappearance, he was never officially seen again, although that didn't stop stories like these from being passed around. Multiple theories say that he was taken out of Ireland. The most popular connects Shergar to the murder of French bloodstock agent Jean-Michel Gambit, who had been trying to buy Shergar months prior to his kidnapping. He was found dead in a burning car near Keeneland Racecourse with multiple bullet wounds. Some say it was a suicide, others say it was murder. The theory alleges that he was killed by the New Orleans Mafia after failing to pay back a loan he was using to try and buy Shergar with. So in revenge, they murdered him and took the horse. The other two theories are even crazier, one saying that the IRA traded Shergar to Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi in exchange for weapons, and the other one suggests that he was either taken or even swam to a vessel that would lead him to Saudi Arabia. The end result either way was that he was owned by a monarch who wanted to improve his horse's bloodlines. While all of these are crazy to think about, with differing levels of evidence to back them up, the most commonly accepted story of what happened to Shergar is both simple and horrifying. While the IRA never admitted that they kidnapped Shergar, two different IRA informants recounted what happened to him, both saying that he was likely dead less than a day after he was kidnapped. After being stolen, Shergar had started to freak out, and the kidnappers did not have anyone on board who actually knew how to handle a horse. When they tried to call a vet to examine him after the horse had fractured his leg, the vet never showed up because his wife threatened to leave him if he did. So the plan then was to release him, but they thought it was too risky, so all that was left was to kill him. He was, quote, machine gunned to death, with Shergar being described as slipping on his own blood and simply refusing to die. Which means that the Polaroids sent to his syndicate, including this one, are likely of his dead body. And his body would never be discovered, although it is commonly believed that his corpse was probably dumped in a bog near the village of Atrium. It ain't the most infamous horse crime story for nothing, but we still got 4 others to talk about. Phar Lap. Official cause of death? Colic from a lethal dose of arsenic. Probably the most famous racehorse ever to come out of the southern hemisphere, like a few other greats before and after him, Phar Lap was given the title of Big Red. But he had a more specific moniker, the Red Terror, and he would earn that title, winning the biggest races in Australia, New Zealand, and Mexico, where he won the Agua Caliente Handicap on the dirt, a race that was at the time the richest horse race in history. It might have been his greatest triumph, but it also would be where he would die. Following his big win, Phar Lap would soon be in severe pain with a high temperature. It only took a few hours for him to pass, and in his autopsy, it was discovered that he had inflamed intestines, as well as lethal amounts of arsenic in his system. This is where the mystery comes in. There are many ways, both accidentally and deliberately, a horse like Phar Lap could have gotten arsenic into his system. It was the 1930s, and arsenic wasn't associated with poison and death like it is today. It was used in paint, and also insecticides. Insecticides is one theory on how he ingested it. Another way he could have gotten it into his system was revealed in an 82-page recipe book by his trainer, Harry Telford, which featured recipes for tonics that he gave his horses, and the ingredients in these tonics are a bit antiquated to say the least, including arsenic as well as other dangerous ingredients like deadly nightshade, strychnine, and even cocaine. While it was very possible Phar Lap was simply a victim of outdated racing medications, it is popularly believed his own success was why he eventually died. Attempts on his life had started over a year before, with many death threats and bribes being sent towards anyone associated with Phar Lap by illegal bookmakers, people who would try to fix horse races to make money, and who were losing money because of Phar Lap. The threats they made would range from pouring acid, injecting him with needles, or, quote, shooting him like a dingo. In fact, someone did try to shoot Phar Lap, but miraculously they missed, so the fact he died so young of poisoning was hard to ignore as just an accident. As it stands, most people believe he was poisoned intentionally, but no clear answer can be given on whether it was just an unfortunate accident, or if the mob had finally got him after years of trying to kill the horse. Arrogate. Official cause of death? Spinal cord lesion. Arrogate is the richest racehorse ever to run in America. He achieved this honor by just winning 3 races, but those 3 races were the richest dirt races in all of the world. And that doesn't even include his first Grade 1 victory, the Travers Stakes in track record time, which still stands today. After that, he took the Breeders' Cup Classic, which is currently the richest race in America, over Triple Crown Near Miss California Chrome. He then took the inaugural Pegasus World Cup, which was at the time the richest race in all of the world, and then he saved his best for last in the $10 million Dubai World Cup, where he overcame being squeezed to dead last at the start and passing all comers. His trainer, the infamous Bob Baffert, thought so highly of him that he said he would have, quote, thrown him against Secretariat, a pretty high honor for somebody who has trained 2 Triple Crown winners. But becoming the best in the world, the only way he could go after that was down. and he went down hard, with his travel to Dubai ruining him physically. After 3 uncharacteristic performances from the once best in the world, Arrogate was retired to stud, and despite how his career had ended, he was still in high demand, and he has yet to disappoint. In this year alone, he has produced the Kentucky Oaks winner Secret Oath, as well as his 2-year-old progeny taking 3 Grade 1 races in the span of just a month, but he would never live to see it. After Arrogate had finished covering a mare like he had done many times before, something seemed amiss. 2 days later, Arrogate would collapse in his stall, and he would never get up. After 4 days of trying, Arrogate was put to sleep on June 2nd, 2020. His death would be announced the same day, devastating racing fans, who still had his win in the Dubai World Cup fresh in their minds. His cause of death was not the most common among racehorses. No injury to his leg or problems with his digestive system. Instead, it was a problem with his spine. But where did the spinal issue come from? That was an answer that no one could give at the time. Even the primary horse racing news sources couldn't tell you, with most answers being vague, saying it was an undetermined illness or a neurological condition. With not much to go off of, people began to speculate. Was it a tumor in his spine? Was his unique conformation an accident waiting to happen? In September of 2020, we would get an answer in a Blood Horse article featuring Garrett O'Rourke, the manager of Juddmonte Farms, who would go on to say, quote, he had a core lesion in his spinal cord, rendering him a quadriplegic. However, how Arrogate had gotten the lesion was never figured out, as he didn't have a major fall or injury prior to his death. O'Rourke's best guess came from Arrogate's temperament. He was a horse who loved to play, rearing and kicking with glee. He would go on to suggest that maybe he had gotten fatal whiplash from his horsing around, although he described the circumstances to cause this a 20 million to 1 shot. And to make uncovering this mystery even more difficult, the article where he states this is hidden underneath an article about Arrogate's first crop hitting the racetrack, with only 2 small paragraphs being about the horse's untimely death. So just directly Googling how Arrogate died will only get you the news articles from the day of his death, misleading people into thinking that there's less known about Arrogate than there actually is. I should know from personal experience, because that's what happened to me while researching this video. Luckily, with this quote from O'Rourke, some of the smoke gets blown away, but not all of it. We may now know how he died, but how he was able to effectively paralyze himself will still be a mystery. Medina Spirit. Official cause of death? Unconfirmed. Speculated to be cardiac arrest. Bob Baffert does not leave the picture with just Arrogate's mysterious passing. With some sources saying up to 74 horses have died in his care, it makes a little too much sense to see him more than once in this video. Medina Spirit had the potential to be one of the greatest underdog stories of all time. As a yearling, he was bought for just $1,000 and went on to cross the wire first in the Kentucky Derby, outdoing even the greatest of Kentucky Derby underdogs like the $1,200 Canonero II. But the person who bought Medina Spirit was a pinhooker, meaning she resold horses. So Medina Spirit would end up at the sales again as a 2-year-old, this time being bought for $35,000 by Zidane Racing, and would eventually land in the training care of Bob Baffert. And when it came time for him to run in the Kentucky Derby, there still was a bit of an underdog story still going on, with Medina Spirit going off at odds of 12 to 1, and not being Baffert's first choice for a Derby horse. Originally, his big shot was Life is Good, who swept the Kentucky Derby preps in California with Medina Spirit trailing behind. But with Life is Good injured, Medina Spirit had to take up the mantle and managed to wire the whole field. It was a record 7th Kentucky Derby win for Bob Baffert, a record that put him in his own category of greatness. No trainer had ever done it before, but a week after the race, a positive test came back. Bethomedazole, a type of steroid, but not a performance-enhancing drug. It is actually an anti-inflammatory drug banned on race day due to its potential to mask injuries in horses. Bob Baffert, in vain, would try every excuse in the book, including cancel culture, ointment, or one of his grooms just peeing in Medina Spirit's hay. Nothing was off limits, but while the debate was still waiting to be settled, Medina Spirit would finish 3rd in the Preakness, and then go on to win the Grade 1 Awesome Again Stakes later in the fall by 5 lengths, and then conclude his 3-year-old season by finishing 2nd in the Breeders' Cup Classic, showing he was still a racehorse with a bright future going into his 4-year-old season. But Medina Spirit never lived to be the age of 4. On December 6, 2021, barely a month after the Breeders' Cup Classic, Medina Spirit was concluding a regular 5-furlong workout. But right as he crossed the finish line, Medina Spirit would unexpectedly drop dead, right on the track. By the time the on-track vet got to him, he was already gone. Medina Spirit wouldn't be able to rest peacefully either, as 2 months after his death, his Kentucky Derby victory was stripped away from him for the positive drug test. Around the same time, a necropsy would be performed to determine a possible cause of death, and come back without a clear answer. There was no illegal medications in his system at the time. He didn't fall from a catastrophic breakdown, although a degenerative joint disease was found in his legs, but had no connection to his death. The best hints would be in his lungs, spleen, and trachea, with his lungs and spleen both being enlarged and his trachea full of foam. All of these things are commonly found in horses dying suddenly, and also are compatible with cardiac arrest, which is why it's the most commonly speculated cause of death for Medina Spirit. However, despite being compatible, it's not a smoking gun. Despite extensive amounts of testing, the California Racing Board came back with no definitive cause of death, a conclusion that most were probably not hoping for. And rather unsurprisingly, the former Kentucky Derby winner being trained by one of the most controversial trainers in horse racing, dropping dead out of the blue with no explanation, doesn't really sit right with people, and the lack of a clear answer is somewhat unnerving. And so Medina Spirit's death remains a mystery. And so do the other 4 horses I covered in today's video. The truth may never be as fully unearthed as people wish with these horse racing cold cases, and that's what keeps people's minds racing as they try to solve the seemingly unsolvable. Where is Shergar? Did someone murder Phar Lap or Aladar? How did Arrogate become paralyzed? And why did Medina Spirit suddenly drop dead? We may never know. Their death is a mystery, and their burial is a secret.